again, my little yarnivores and spiderettes and arachnids. Fiber Spider back again with another tutorial just for you. Hope all of you are doing really well today, because today I'm going to show you how to do some loom knitting. Now, I know it has been more than a hot minute since I did a loom knitting tutorial, but I thought it was high time. It's only been about 4 years, so that is what we're going to do today. And we are going to go back to the knitting basics. Now, in traditional knitting, one of my favorite stitches is the garter stitch. It's really simple, it lays flat, it's gorgeous, it's useful for scarves, for blankets, for all sorts of goodies, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with loom knitting, you use one of these bad boys. And they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. This is the smallest one that I have, which is a round loom knit piece. And then they also have, these are long loom knit devices. Now, you can use either or for this particular stitch, doesn't matter which. I'm going to be using my trusty round one, but you could use either or. Now, with this one, you can work back and forth. Basically, for instance, for argument's sake, you could start on this peg and then work all the way around and then double back this way. With the round one, well, I'm only going to work on maybe like 6 or 8 pegs. So you work on a bunch of pegs and then you work back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Now, because loom knitting is done essentially in the round, if you will, you can't turn your piece. With traditional knitting, you turn your piece after every row, and it's a 1-row repeat. With loom knitting, it is actually a 2-row repeat, but it's really, really simple, and it also has a really nice selvage edge. It's a slip stitch edge, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So it has a lot of really cool applications. Now, for today's example, I used my trusty go-to Lion Brand Pound of Love in the colorway of Heather Rose. And I see so many tutorials that use 2 strands of a worsted weight yarn held together. And yeah, it's really toasty-woasty and super thick, but I wanted something a little bit more drapey. So I'm just going to be using 1 strand, and so you can see, you know, I wouldn't say it's lacy, but it is very, very drapey. So you can use just 1 strand, no problem. By the way, for those of you, I know you're going to ask, for those of you that are wondering, the brand of this particular loom that I have, it is Loops and Threads. I found it at my local Michael's. By the way, this video is not sponsored in any capacity, but I know I'm going to get asked, what is the brand? There's another company called Knitting Board. They do them as well. And for today's example, going to be using also Pound of Love in the colorway of Sugar Cookie. You know, it's a nice taupe color. And so yeah, without further ado and all of my yammering, let's get started, shall we? Alrighty. Okay, so to begin with, going to make a slip knot, like so, and going to put it on our little holder peg right there. Now, we're not going to jump directly into the garter stitch pattern. We're going to do a cast on first. And because this is just, you know, a very basic swatch that we're going to be doing today, I'm going to cast on, I want to say, well, it could be really any number. It doesn't have to have like a specific multiple or anything like that. I think I'm going to do 6 stitches so that we can do a bunch of rows together. Now, when you are doing your initial wrapping, you want to go loosely. I can't stress this enough. You want to go very loosely. And we're going to be doing what's called an E-wrap. So going around this first peg right here, going around the back, full, like that. So, oops. Hello. I'm trying to go loosely, but I want it to stay on the peg. And we're going to do 6 of those E wraps. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Nice and loose. And then slide those loops down a little bit. Now this last peg right here, okay, we're going to do what is called a U wrap immediately thereafter, because we have to lock this one into place. So basically I went around from the back to the front to the back again. Okay, and actually I'm going to do that again. So this last peg going around, push that down, and then go around again. And going to bring that bottom loop over the top loop. Like so. And we're going to do that for the remainder of our loops. We're going to do U wraps, and that's going to be our cast on. So to the back, lower loop, over that top loop, another U wrap, lower loop over the top loop, another U wrap, bottom loop over the top loop. And if you wrapped initially nice and loosely, you shouldn't have too much problem. Now I have a problem with tension and with wrapping things too tightly. I will be the first to admit it. So sometimes things get a wee bit tight for me. So it's an exercise in patience and practice. Now all of our stitches are cast on and ready to go. So I'm just going to slide them on down again, and then we get to start in with the actual 2-row repeat. Okay, so for the 2-row repeat, row 1 is going to be a knit row, row 2 is going to be a purl row, and it's just repeating that over and over again. And don't worry, we are going to do a couple of repeats, so not to worry. So making sure that our little loops are all the way down. Now, going to be doing E wraps for the knitting, and then a different kind of wrap for the purling. Now, I kind of like to hold my loom sort of like this. Makes it a little bit easier for me. So going to do E wraps along these 6 pegs. Now, what I find works really, really well is instead of going in directly to doing our E wraps, going around the back of this first peg, going around the back, and then in between, and then do your first E wrap. So you are creating 2 loops that you can utilize. So it's sort of like doing a bit of a serpentine figure 8. I'm going to do that again. So this is where the tail is. Go around the back to the front, through, and then E wrap. And then do E wraps for the remainder of your pegs, like so. Okay, and then bring the lower loops over the top loops, and that is your knitting row. Very, very easy. And because it's just a 2-row repeat, oh, you will have plenty of time to practice. Believe you me. Okay, so that is our knit row. Now, for row number 2, the purl row, going to bring the yarn to the front, and we're going to skip this first peg and the last peg when doing our purls. So we're just going to purl these 4 stitches in between. So with the yarn in the front, going to go underneath this loop here, grab the yarn, pull it up to make a loop. Then we pull the loop off of the peg, and the loop that we just made, we put that back onto the peg, and then give it a slight tug, not too tight, but cinch it just a little bit, and that is a purl stitch. So we've got 3 more to go. Go into that loop, grab the yarn, pull up a loop, pull the loop off the peg, put the new loop onto the peg, and pull. Next one, go into the loop, pull up a loop of yarn, loop off of the peg, new loop onto the peg, and pull. Going in, grabbing the yarn from below, pull up a loop, pull that loop off of the peg, put the new loop onto the peg, and pull. And then yarn to the back again. And that's it. That's it. That's all there is to it. Just push your loops down on your pegs, and you just keep repeating that over and over again. And that is exactly what we're going to do for a couple of rows. So essentially rows 1 and 2 is also rows 3 and 4, depends on how you look at it. So row 3, we'll call it, it's going to be another knit row, and then row 4, it's going to be another purl row. So we are in between the first 2 pegs right there. So going around the back to the front, around that peg, and then E-wrap the next peg. So around the back, round the back, round the back, round the back, and around the back. And then lower loops over the top loops. And the reason why we're skipping the first and last pegs when doing the purl stitching, that's what creates that really gorgeous edge. Okay, so that is all of our knit stitches. Now for the purl stitches, bring the yarn to the front in between those pegs. And we've got row 4. So going into that loop, pull up a loop of yarn, loop off of the peg, put that new loop onto the peg, and pull. Going into that next loop, grab the yarn, pull up a loop, take the loop off of the peg, and then put that new loop onto the peg and pull. Scoot into that stitch, pull up a loop of yarn, pull the old loop off of the peg, new loop onto the peg. And one more, going in, grabbing a loop of yarn, pulling it up, old loop off, new loop on, and pull. Okay, yarn to the back, scoot your stitches down, and also at this point we've worked a couple of rows, so now I'm going to take my slip knot off of my peg there, undo my knot, and then bring it to the inside of the loom and down so it's nice and out of the way. Okay, let's do another repeat. So for the knit row, going around the back of that first peg and through, and E-wrap. Now, I also would suggest, I should have said this earlier, what I would suggest is don't try to actually do what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Watch first, absorb some of the material, and then go about doing it. Okay, so lower over the upper, lower over upper, lower over upper, lower over upper, lower over upper, and lower over upper. There. And then yarn to the front. And we're going to do our purl stitches. Again, skipping this first one and the last one. So, grab a loop of yarn, pull it up, out with the old, and in with the new. Going in, grabbing your yarn, pulling up that loop, out with the old, in with the new, and pull. Going into the next stitch, pulling up a loop, out with the old, in with the new. One more. Pulling up a loop, out with the old, in with the new. And there you are. And then you would push your stitches down again, and you can see down here we already have some fabric going. Yes, we do. It's a beautiful thing. All right, let's do one more series together. So going around the back to the front, and then E-wrap your remaining stitches. There we are. And then bottom over the top, 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 bottom over the top. And then get your yarn to the front and purl those stitches. Skip that first one. Going in, grabbing the yarn, pulling up a loop, out with the old, in with the new, and pull. So yeah, that's really all there is to it. Just keep repeating these 2 rows over and over again. Now the practice piece that I showed you just before, that actually I used the entire loom, all 24 pegs. But you can make this as wide or as narrow as you want to. The only limitation is the number of pegs. Now some of the looms, they have lots and lots and lots of pegs. That they do. But if you have just a smaller loom like this one, nothing's stopping you from making a much larger piece, because with the slip stitch edging that it creates, let me show you my practice piece here. With the slip stitch edging, it's actually very, very easy to make several smaller pieces and then stitch them together. And along this edge, let me show you, you could go underneath both loops of the V, just like that, and create your seam through that edge. You could also do a whip stitch, a blanket stitch, a ladder stitch, going through these edge stitches, and it creates a really nice, clean finish. So yeah, you could totally do an entire blanket with a loom this size. You know, it'll be either done in strips or like a patchwork, however, which way you choose to do it. So I'm going to do, I think, perhaps a couple more repeat rows of 3 and 4, 1 and 2, again, depending upon how you look at it. I'm going to keep doing a couple of repeats, and then I'm going to show you how to do the bind off. All right, I'll see you in a bit. All right, so after doing your garter stitch for a while and you're ready to bind off, well, that's what I'm going to show you how to do now. So much like in regular knitting, you would start off by knitting your first 2 stitches, and then you start the decrease thereafter. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to, again, go around the back to the front and E-wrap that first of the working stitches there. So we've got our 2 stitches. We're going to leave the rest of them alone for now. So going to go lower over the top and lower over the top. So those are our first 2 stitches. And then sort of scooch these down just a little bit, and then going to bring this second one over to the first. Now I find what works easiest is, instead of going from the bottom up, go from the top down. I find that it works a little bit easier. So pull this stitch up and off, and then scoot it on over to that first peg. There we are. Then lower over the top, and then move this loop back to the peg that we just took it from. There we are. Now you want to do this loosely. Again, that's an exercise that I need to practice. I will be the first to admit, because I have a tendency of doing this rather tightly, and it creates a puckering at the top edge. You want to avoid that, of course. So this working yarn is going to the loop on this first peg. So going to take the yarn, and we're going to do an E-wrap around the next stitch. So around the back, like so, and lower loop over the top loop, and then scooting this stitch to the left, it's a little bit tricky since I'm doing this on camera. Yeah, I'm just going to grab it with my little fingers and then put it on there. There we go. See, I can do it. Then lower loop over the top loop, and then take that loop and put it back onto the loop on the right. We just keep doing that for the remainder of the stitches. So E-wrap the next stitch, lower over the top, scooch them down a bit, from the right to the left, lower over the top. You know what? Let me grab that working yarn. There we go. Lower over the top, and then move the loop back to the right, and then E-wrap the next stitch. Lower over the top, right to the left, lower over the top, left to the right, E-wrap the next stitch, bottom over the top, right to the left, bottom over the top, and this is your last live loop. So you can pull this loop out a bit. And there you go. See, I'm always afraid of going too tightly, but I think I did it pretty well. Perhaps a little bit tight at the beginning there, but yeah, that works. We have ourselves a mini rectangle. It's an Afghan for a mouse. Sure, why not? And there you go. It's got a really great selvage. It has an excellent drape. It's squishy. I love the texture. And so you would cut your yarn, put the tail through the loop, cinch it, and you are ready to rock. And then, yeah, you can take this piece and attach it to a bunch of other pieces and create a really nice full-sized blanket if that is what you choose. Or, you know, if you want to go for fewer stitches, you can make a lovely, lovely, snuggly-wuggly scarf. And there you go. Alrighty, my dears, so that is going to conclude today's video on how to do a loom knit garter stitch. Really hope that you liked it, and if you did, please give a little thumbs up button down below. You know that I appreciate your appreciation as always. And let me know what you think in the comments section. What sorts of stitches, perhaps even some projects, might you be interested in as far as loom knitting is concerned? I do already have one in mind. I'm not giving any spoilers, though. You know, it's a project that I'm working on, and I want to say I'm about 75-ish% done, so that should be coming relatively soon. And yeah, I thought, you know what? It's been way too long since I've done anything with loom knitting, but hey, here we are now. So yes, I do hope that you liked it. And yeah, so let me know, what are you going to do with this fabulous stitch? What sort of projects, what sorts of yarns, what sorts of colors? Always interested in hearing about your creative journey. Yeah, so until next time, you know what to do, right? I want all of you to stay inspired, stay caffeinated, stay stitching, stay looming, stay knitting, any variation therein, and take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you in my next video. Bye for now, everybody, and have a great day.